So I would like to move on to Simon. Hello, Simon. Simon is Simon is a security engineer at Deepblue. He's actually a cybersecurity consultant for quite a while. He's also representing himself like the Jack, and I'm quoting, Jack of all trade and master of some. So I'm assuming that you are a master of ransomware. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, to some degree, that could be correct.
Okay, so Simon, the stage is all yours. You have also the control on the presentation.
All right. So hello everyone. Thank you, Leo, for the introduction. So I'm going to talk to you about how to survive ransomware in the cloud. It's now work. Okay, works now. Great. So as Leo mentioned, my name is Simon Bruno. I'm a cybersecurity engineer at Deepblue. Before becoming a cybersecurity consultant and engineer, I was doing DevOps, so also somewhat related, especially to ransomware. So the problem we're going to talk again about is ransomware. So first things first, let's talk about a couple of attacks that happened in recent years. In this example, an Australian health insurer called Medibank loses all of its customer data to a ransomware attack. They also confirmed that the attackers deleted some of their data. In this next example, a UK car dealer sees systems permanently deleted in an apparent ransomware attack. They also say that some of their core systems have been damaged beyond repair or have been permanently deleted. Another example where a vindictive couple just decides to delete hotel chain data for fun. So in all of these attacks that we just looked at, the common denominator was that data was deleted. And if you had backups, you could recover from it and you could continue operating. And those two attacks, not only was the company compromised, their backups were also compromised. So an attack on the Belarusian railway server happened, and attackers mentioned that they had access to the backup server that contains tens of terabytes of data. In this example, a proxy server basically closes down after this attack, and they state that the intruders managed to overwrite critical servers, data, and also backups. So what this means, and if you cannot recover using your backups, you're going to be in so much trouble because you're going to lose basically all of your data. So again, if you're having backups, don't have them locally, because if you're going to have a breach, your backups are also going to get encrypted and lost. So let's imagine this scenario, because when you read about it in the news, it's not personal. You don't really feel the stress of it and how much it actually impacts you. So let's go through an example. So let's say you're a medical service provider called We Heal You Insurance. You're from Oklahoma, you have 9,000 employees, you're established somewhere in the 1950s. One day, all of your systems get encrypted. You try to log in, nothing works, you lost access to completely everything. You get a ransom note from Logbit saying that they're demanding $15 million in payout to decrypt your files. You're in the news, but definitely for the wrong reasons. Journalists, different websites, or all news channels are all messaging you and emailing you and calling you just to try to understand what happened. You're dealing with all this pressure. The actual impact of the attack was that all of your data and all of your backups for 2 million of your users were encrypted, and you have access to none of that, and you have no way to recover. The result basically after that is chaos. Since you can't recover anything, all of your systems are down, your customers are leaving you, they will sue you because you're not providing them their services. Even if you pay, there's no guarantee that decryption will work or that it will work on time. Paying the ransom could also come with some legal trouble because you're not always allowed to pay the ransom. So basically, you can survive data theft, but you cannot always survive data loss. Another example of some legal issues that you will encounter is, depending on your state, you will have some state laws regarding the information that you keep. So for example, for us, since we're based in Oklahoma, the Oklahoma Department of Health Regulation states that healthcare facilities must retain medical records for a minimum of 5 years beyond the date the patient was last seen. So besides all of your previous problems, you're also going to face legal problems in the state that you're operating. There are many more examples of laws that you need to abide. It depends on your industry, it depends on the regulators you're working on, but again, just an example. So let's get into it. How do you actually survive ransomware? So first things first, you need to have a plan for your backups, because if you don't, you're living dangerously, and I would definitely not recommend that. So to survive, you basically need to answer 2 questions. Do you have backups, and are they immutable? And when I say immutable, I mean that they cannot be easily modified, changed, corrupted, deleted, you name it, either by you or the attacker. There's never 100% guarantee that you can make it fully immutable, but you can make it extremely hard and expensive to actually do that. So first things first, when you're designing your plan, create an inventory. You can do that by having interviews, reviewing documentations, and configurations in your company. When interviewing, try to talk to some executives, for example, a hands-on CTO. You can talk to security and engineering team leaders in your company. You can talk to a developer that's been in your company since the beginning and he knows absolutely everything about it. And last but definitely not least would be your DevOps and IT departments. If anybody has a chance of knowing what's the backup status in your company, it's gonna be them. Next, you should review documents that you have. So go to your knowledge sharing systems such as Confluence, Notion, and SharePoint. File sharing systems such as Google Drive and M365. Go to ticketing systems, Jira, Monday, ServiceNow, whatever your choice. And search for terms like backup, disaster recovery, business impact analysis, and business continuity planning. Finding anything with those keywords will help you understand the current state that you're in, or the state that you were supposed to be in. Again, this will help you create your inventory or the desired state. You should also review configurations. If you have any backup systems in place, look at what they're backing up and look where they're backing it to, because you will want to eventually verify that those backups are immutable and they cannot be changed and that they're safe. You should also look at native backup capabilities that your cloud provider gives you. So for example, if you log into an SQL server in GCP and you see that it has backups enabled, this is most definitely some important data, and you would want to make sure that those backups for this server are secure. So now that we have our inventory, what do we do next? So first things first, you should prioritize, because you will see a lot of different systems, SaaS systems, servers, different backups. You need to understand what is critical for you in your organization. And once you have that figured out, you can actually try and answer those 2 questions that we talked about. So now you know if you have backups for your important systems, and after looking at them, you should be able to understand, are they immutable? So next thing you should do is increase the coverage of your backups. If you created your inventory and you see that you do not have enough backups, first things first, create them. And then you should be dealing with hardening of your backups. You can move them off-site, you can restrict access to them, and you can make them immutable. You should. This could basically, immutability and hardening can be summed up as this. You're making backups for your backups. You want to make sure completely that you have something to fall back on. So again, when you're deciding what to start with, be it coverage or hardening, look at your inventory, look at your desired state. If you have enough backups for you to start with for your important systems, you should start with hardening. If you see that you're missing some backups, you should definitely start with coverage and increasing the backups for your critical systems. Now let's talk about some design considerations where you're creating your backup plan. So the first thing we're going to talk about is we call it paranoid mode. Basically, we're assuming that when you got breached, everything, it's a doomsday scenario. Your admin got breached, everything can be deleted, everything is compromised, your system and your environment is no longer safe. So what you should do is create a separate backup tenant. It should be completely separate from your IT system, so it doesn't share identities or doesn't use the same control systems. It should be registered under a new domain. So you're basically creating a new, completely separate organization for your backup purposes. And you should limit access to it. And when I say limit, I really mean it, like limit it as much as possible. It should be 2 to 3 people, highly trusted, highly qualified, and only they should have access to it. And even them should not have access to it, only in case of emergency. Again, limit access, nobody should touch this. This is your lifeline in case you suffer ransomware. This is how you're gonna recover. Next thing we're gonna talk about is air-gapped environments. And what I mean by that is when you create your safe and secure backup tenant, when you're creating your backups and you're moving them from your production environment into the backup environment, do not give access to your production environment to change things in the backup tenant. Because again, if your production environment is compromised, with the access that it has, they could also damage your backups in the backup tenant. Instead, go the other way around. Give your backup tenant access into production so it can take the backups that it needs and it communicates with production. It might not always be possible. Again, nothing in life is, nothing's perfect. You might need to give access to your production to do something in your backup environment, but limit the access as much as possible. Make sure they cannot override anything in that environment. They cannot damage any of your existing backups. All they're doing is minimal things, and again, cannot harm your backups in any way. The next thing is project naming. So when you're working on this, don't call your plan my security plan, my DRP. Don't give it an obvious name. Give it a generic name like Hermes or something obscure. Because if you get compromised and the attackers are in your system and they're gathering information about whether or not you have backups, they will find it if you call it my backup plan. And if you call it Hermes, for example, you will not prevent them from finding information about your backups and your plans, but you will definitely slow them down in this process. And as such, you will have more time yourself to prepare or find them before they can cause any harm. Another thing is now you have your backups, you have your secure tenants, everything's good, you feel safe, but don't relax just yet. You should monitor your backups. Take the logs from them, send them to your SIEM of choice. Look at things like heartbeat to make sure that backups are actually being created daily, for example. You should monitor storage sizes to see if something is wrong there. So for example, if on a daily basis you're backing up 50 gigabytes of data and one day it jumps to 500, something might be wrong in your configuration and you will suffer and get a lot of charges in terms of prices. And or on the other side, it could be you're backing up 50 gigabytes of data and suddenly it's 0. So it could be then again, there's a misconfiguration or somebody actually deleted your backup source. I mean, your data source, and then you have a problem, but you know about it right away. And lastly, you should monitor access. As I've mentioned, nobody should be accessing the system. Nobody should be logging in on a daily basis. Nobody should be touching, changing things. So monitor anything related to access in that environment because it should be safe. Next thing we're going to talk about is costs. Because in a perfect world, you have an infinite budget. You can do whatever you want. You can back up absolutely everything. But Alas, that is not the case. You will face some monetary restraints from your organization. So here's an example of a Russian aviation company that said they didn't have backups because they just were not allocated funds by the Russian Ministry of Finance. So those things happen. You will maybe not have backups because your project or plan were too expensive and nobody from management will approve it. So let's try to keep costs to a minimum. So some of the things you can do is lower costs by having an appropriate retention policy. So this is just an example in a small template, but basically what you can do is to have daily backups with a 7-day retention period, weekly backups with a month-long retention period, and monthly with a 3-month retention period. Again, this is just an example. You should analyze what's critical to you. If you have retention policies for 5 years, if we heal you insurance, you need to keep data for longer. Again, each company will have its own case, and it's highly dependent, but you can, if you plan properly, you could lower costs significantly. Next is storage selection. So we're going to look at storage as it is in GCP. So you have 4 different tiers. You have standard, nearline, cold line, and archive. And if you see, there are different storage duration requirements. So for standard storage, you can keep it for as long as you like. You can upload something, delete it immediately. Nearline storage, you have to keep the data that you put there, and you will pay for it for 30 days, even if you delete it immediately. Likewise for cold line and archive storage. So you can lower costs by selecting storage correctly, because we can see that archive storage is 10 times less expensive than standard. So depending on your use cases, if you select storage correctly, this could also help you significantly lower costs for your project. Next thing, and this is, I feel, is not something that is talked about, is egress. So egress is basically the option in the process of taking data outside of your environment and putting it somewhere else. So for example, if you have multiple cloud systems because you started with AWS and then you switch to GCP and still have some legacy data that you need to keep for compliance in AWS or something like that, when you're creating your backup tenants, create 2 of them. Create one in GCP and the other one in AWS, so that your backups from GCP will be kept in GCP, and AWS likewise will be kept in AWS, because any data that you will move across the 2 will cost you extra money that you have no reason to pay. Opening an account is free. You should definitely consider that. And another thing, if your source of data or your backups are in an EU region, keep them in EU, because if you move data across regions, that also counts as egress. And if you plan this correctly, in some cases, egress charges could be kept to a minimum or even free. Again, if you do it within the same cloud environment and within the same region, you might not suffer any egress charges for your data. So those were just some examples. There's more things that we can talk about. Again, not currently in the scope. So basically, we talked about effects of ransomware. I'm sure everybody's familiar. Your data gets stolen, but people don't talk a lot about what happens to your data actually after that it has been stolen. So some examples where companies did not recover or did not have or had their backups encrypted. We talked about how to get started with a plan to analyze the posture of your backups and your systems to make sure that you can survive such an attacks. And we talked about some design consideration, be it regarding security of your backups or the costs. And if you have any follow-up questions or you want to reach me or ask me anything, you can talk to me at simon@deepblue.is. That'll be all for me. Thank you so much. Back to you, Uriel.
Okay, thank you, Simon. Oh, I think I learned a couple of things related to the how to be resilient or more resilience related to ransomware on the cloud. And I think there is a shift in the mindset of an attacker and also companies that understood that the ransomware could be shifted to the cloud. It's not just the on-prem. And when you are residing on the cloud, there are more attack surface. The attack surface was actually extended due to the fact that your cloud is being on the cloud and you need the access, and lots of people has the access and they are accessing for multiple points or access points, those or another's, and you might be affected.
Definitely. And in recent years, there's been an increase where different ransomware programs are specifically looking for backups and automatically deleting them or encrypting them when they get access. So this is something that is, in recent years, has been really focused by the attackers.
Wow. Okay, so guys, if you have any questions to Simon, please write them down in the Q&A in the chat. He will answer everything. If you have any questions from any lecture, please also write it down. We will answer all your questions, of course. Uriel, I can see that you are the first one who want to ask something.
Yeah. Actually, I want to ask two questions. One, what is your recommendation to back up my data on-prem or in the cloud? This is question number one. And question number two, you said that my backup data should be air-gapped. So what is this, the safest process? Well, I need to automate it, right? So I cannot it be completely air-gapped because I need to pull my data from someplace, right? So when you say air-gapped, how it comes with the fact that it should be automated?
Okay, so I'll answer your first question where you asked, where should you keep it, the data, or in your data center or the cloud? So there's a 3-2-1 rule, which was initially invented by a photographer for how to keep your film safe, but backup companies are also using that rule. You should have 3 copies of your data. You should have 2 of them should be on different mediums, and 1 should be in a different site. So in this case, you can have local copies of your data on your data center. 1 could be on a different server, and the 3rd copy should be somewhere that is not related to your data center. So for example, the cloud.
All right, okay.
And the second question about having an air gap. So I can give you a concrete example if you'd like. What I mean by having access from one way and not the other. So let's say you're backing up an SQL server. One way to back it up is to log in to it, and there are different utilities to take the data from it. So basically what I'm suggesting is you connect from your secure tenant to your environment, you pull the data to yourself, and you don't give your SQL or your environment access to your backup tenant. Basically, you're doing it the other way around. You're connecting to the source you want to back up. You're connecting to the bucket that you want to copy, and not the other way around. You're taking the data from the production or your environment into the backup instead of the other way around.
Okay, so still from the source place, I would call it, you'll have an access to the SQL server in our case. So it's not completely air-gapped. I mean,
I'm saying it should be. Okay, so not for, okay, maybe air-gapped. You're thinking about something else. I mean, it should be one directional communication as much as possible. So you're communicating from the backup to your source and not the other way around.
Right. Maybe a good idea is like to back it up and to cut the chain. I mean, the source is backing it up and then it's cutting the chain to the source. I mean, let's say you're accessing to the cloud, so you're like allowing some security groups to access the backup using the automation, and then you're backing it up, and then you cut the chain, you disable the security group.
For example, there's many ways. It really depends on your environment, on your stack, but the concept is it should be one directional as much as possible from your backup to the source.
Okay. There is a question in the Q&A. Alex Cohen is asking, wouldn't it be safer to keep backups at different region and or provider? And can I keep my backups in my local data center? That's interesting.
Okay, so the first part is you would, if you don't have monetary restraints and you want to copy your data to somewhere else, let's say from US to EU, you could do that. There is also in the cloud, you have multi-region storage. So for example, in GCP, the example that we looked at, it was US multi-region. So if you're concerned about a natural disaster, a multi-region will ensure that even if the East Coast suffers immensely, the West Coast is still holding your data. Same thing for the provider. There's going to be egress charges because you're going to take data out of your environment into some other cloud environment. If this is not something that concerns you, you should maybe consider it, but it also really depends on your environment, how you're backing up, what you're backing up. It's something that is not really, I can tell you, again, you can contact me by email. I can help you figure out, but in general, no monetary considerations. You can do whatever you like. And can you keep your backup in my local data center? So again, as Uriel asked previously, you could, but you want to ensure that if your data center is breached, that your backups are not in the same place, because they will also get contaminated, encrypted. So basically, that's it.
Okay. That's very interesting. Thank you for that, Simon. Guys, if you have any questions to any of our lectures, please write them down in the chat or Q&A. We'll answer any questions that you have. Moreover, each and every lecture has his own contact details, so you can contact them directly. Someone asked me related to the session recording and the presentation. So everything will be uploaded to our LinkedIn page. You can go follow us. You will get the alert when we will update and upload all the session recordings. Give us 1 to 2 days. We'll do it very fast. If you have any further questions, please write them down in the Q&A. Okay, let's see if there are any further. Uriel, do you have any points from your point of view? Any further issues or questions you want to focus or add?
No, not at this point of time. No, I think it was good. It was clear, and we all understand that even we can rely on any provider, even if it's Azure or AWS. We need still to protect ourselves as organization, because we can see a lot of companies, even small companies, that they are 100% in the cloud. So there is no, I would call it, on-prem secure process. There is no proxy. There is no EDRs. There is no something that monitoring the traffic from those clients to the cloud. So still they must have an on-prem security, even if they are 100% in the cloud, because you can't even sure that the provider is 100% secure. This is my point of view on the security of things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I do want to add on that. I think the first lecture was related to the data and shifting the data once you know which data you have and how to protect it. And of course, it's very dependent on if you have some private data, which kind of regulation, what will be the necessary requirement or the bare minimum. And following that, you need to advance, or you must advance to a more sophisticated attack and be more resilient, because ransomware, as we saw, can actually shut down a company. And Simon said about it, what will be his tips in order to back up your data accordingly. prepare yourself to the worst case scenario. Sometimes it's the best to prepare yourself for the worst case, that all your data are being encrypted, and then what you need to do in order to return back to business. And each and every company has their own SLAs. Some needs to be 24/7, some are not, but you need always to take into consideration what will be if your data will be stolen or will be lost or will be encrypted. How fast you can come back from backups. Simon talked about it. Like, you need to test your backup, validate that they are live and aligned with what you have in production. The data will not be lost, but also perform drills of backup restoration in order to validate that you're not just backupping, but you can also restore. Very important point. Simon,
definitely. Yeah, I want to add to your point. So yeah, definitely. I didn't touch on this in this lecture because I think the most important thing is actually having some data. Even if you cannot recover immediately, the fact that you have it is more valuable than you testing and waiting until I get my backups. Are they recovering properly? So yes, definitely. When you have your backups, you should test them that you can recover. You should set objectives of how fast and how automatically you can recover. But I think the first thing that should be done to survive actually a ransomware attack is have your data backed up elsewhere. So yeah, great point. Thank you for bringing it up as well. But yes, that's
of course. Well, thank you very much. Guys, if you have any questions, write them down. If not, we will finalize. Guys, it was great having you here. Thank you all for joining. Thank you, Shlomi, Uriel, and also Simon for a very insightful lecture. Guys, if you have any further questions, contact them. And stay safe and secure. We will upload all the session recordings and the presentation to our LinkedIn page, as I mentioned, and we are preparing our next meetup. So we'll also update you. So thank you very much all, and stay safe. Bye for now. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys. Bye-bye.
Guys, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.